Welcome to It's Your Ego, Stupid, a show lovingly intended for millions of spiritual, intelligent, and imperfect people like you who may at times be led into ego stupidity, a lesser version of yourself and a lesser version of life. This show will give you a much deeper understanding of what ego is, what it's doing to your life, how it can weaken your human and spiritual wellness, and how you can heal in each of these areas if needed. It's Your Ego, Stupid will heighten your awareness of the intense link between your ego and spirit, your humanity and divinity, and the synergy that can lead to the best version of you and your life. Your host is Dr. Nick Martin, a licensed psychologist who has worked in the clinical, university, school, and private practice settings over the past 40 years, while serving as a therapist, diagnostician, educator, and consultant. Welcome again to It's Your Ego, Stupid. And now your host, Dr. Nick Martin.
Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Nick Martin, and thank you for listening to It's Your Ego, Stupid on OMTimes Radio. I hope you've had a great week as you go about meeting the many important challenges that we all face, which include during today's show our focus on genuine happiness and how lower ego flexibility can get in the way of our ability to experience it. It's Your Ego, Stupid is a program for spiritual, intelligent, and imperfect people, just like you and me, who may at times be led by our ego into something I call ego stupidity. Ego stupidity that can be affecting relationships with our family, our friends, co-workers, and even with ourselves that could stand some improvement, maybe a lot of improvement. Lots of destructiveness and distance taking place involving poor communication, inability to compromise around needs, and lack of compassion and empathy, often rooted in ego energy issues. Ego stupidity that can be impacting our efforts to achieve and to be successful with our potential, to experience a sense of meaning to our life, coming to know our life's purpose, and getting on with our life's work. Lots of people reporting dissatisfaction with their station in life, lacking a sense of direction, feeling lost, and a sense of meaninglessness rooted in ego energy issues. Ego stupidity, affecting one's ability to deal effectively with all of the changes, adversity, stressors, and conflicts taking place in our life, often leading to their managing us rather than our managing them, again rooted in ego energy issues. Ego stupidity making it difficult to grow our mind with truth, while keeping us stuck in faulty beliefs, values, attitudes, and prejudices, many nowadays acquired from unfiltered social media, fake news on the internet, and opinion news on TV, masquerading as truth. Ego stupidity making it difficult to feel genuine, lasting happiness, the focus of our program today, while often leading us into unneeded anxiety, anger, guilt, sadness, or fake happiness being substituted for the real thing. And finally, ego stupidity impacting our spiritual wellness and ability to be the love, life, and energy God is in our daily thoughts, words, and deeds. As you can see, there are lots of important places that ego stupidity can make its appearance in our lives. If you are an intelligent, spiritual being, and you are, and things aren't going as well as you'd like, you've come to the right place. Because a lot of what's going wrong has nothing to do with our intelligence, the absence of spirituality, or being mentally ill, and has a lot more to do with our ego energy, serving as the fuel for ego stupidity. Your lives, relationships, and experiences have taught me all of that over the past 40 years, and what I'm sharing with you in my shows, books, and website about ego energy and ego stupidity, and how we can heal it with ego medicine when and where needed. Again, thank you for tuning in to It's Your Ego, Stupid on OMTimes Radio. During our program today, we're going to be continuing to focus on our ability to experience genuine happiness, an important area of life that many people are struggling with. and in particular, what lower ego flexibility can be doing to get in the way of that happening. Ego flexibility that often leads to a rigid, inflexible understanding of what happiness is and how to get it. Sort of many people taking the I'm right, you're wrong, or dogmatic approach to knowing and working with happiness. Previously, I've shared with you what I've learned from you and many others about the main ingredients to genuine happiness. Another way to think of them is as gatekeepers or prerequisites or routes to experiencing genuine happiness. It's hard to be truly happy if these are not part of your life. And these included being able to be at peace with yourself, others, and the world. Being motivated by love in your dealings with people and life, rather than fear or anger. Also, being connected to a sense of your life's purpose, both humanly and spiritually, which is intimately connected to your sense of service in whatever you're doing right now. Being free of inappropriate expectations of yourself, of others, and from others. And lastly, being able to love and accept yourself just as you are, while being willing to grow. Each of these are made more difficult when lower ego flexibility is at work in your life. So ask yourself, how am I doing in these areas? Is there a need for growth or improvement? If there is, it's very likely your ego energy is getting in the way and distancing you from genuine happiness. In our program today, we'll be looking at the impact of lower ego flexibility on genuine happiness, which is an issue that millions of people are experiencing, often linked to thinking they know the truth about what happiness is and what it takes to experience it. These can be people living in roles such as authoritarian or the religious extremist, the ethnocentrist, or the love elitist that I talk about in my book, The Two Voices Within, each of them having difficulty feeling genuine happiness. They aren't at peace with themselves, others, or the world, because the world is often not complying with the version of truth that they hold about it and the people in it. They aren't motivated by love in their dealings with people in life, but rather by a need to convert people to their version of the truth, which often leads them to be frustrated, angry, resentful, disappointed, and discouraged when the inevitable pushback comes to them. They don't experience a sense of purpose in their life rooted in service to others, both human and divine, but mainly to themselves, in which a false sense of service is built upon, quotes, helping others better know their truth. The idea of living and let live is not part of their mantra. They often have expectations and make demands upon themselves and others that are inappropriate and are lacking in a complete grasp of the concepts in which people are living and leading their lives, often missing the hidden details going on behind the scenes. And they also have difficulty accepting and loving a version of themselves if they find themselves falling short of the requirements for happiness they have fashioned for themselves. Things like the right job, the right kids, the right home, or the right money. They often experience pseudo-happiness, or what I call fake happiness, when things, people, and the world are not in alignment with their version of truth. And they also feel anger, frustration, and resentment when they are not. They are living a version of happiness that's built mainly on physical or psychological pleasure. Again, something I call fake happiness, which doesn't last because different versions of human truth will inevitably confront them. And the world is not standing still, despite their desire that it would do so. Does any of this sound familiar to you for somebody that you know? Millions of people do experience these difficulties because there are billions of people on the planet, and every one of them has an ego, just like you and me. I want you to take a look to see if you or somebody you know, live with, or work with is experiencing any of the symptoms ego stupidity, and ego impact on spiritual wellness affecting happiness that I'll be talking about today. I want you to diagnose you because you're the only one living you 24/7. So now we're going to take a look at some of the symptoms which indicate if a lower ego flexibility voice is talking to and through you in your life. Here's the first one. You have difficulty experiencing happiness and only seem to feel it when people are agreeing with you. People with lower ego flexibility put a lot of emphasis on their way of looking at things, thinking about things, their version of truth. And the more that others can be seemingly mirroring it, the happier they seem to be. So some of the questions or ideas connected to this symptom to think about: do you want and need lots of agreement from others? How tolerant are you of the disagreement that others might bring to you? Or do you think that your version of the world and life and reality is the right one for everybody? People with lower ego flexibility energy often insist that others come around to looking at things the way they do, and perhaps living the way they do. Are you happiest when you're surrounded by people who think and agree with you? People with lower ego flexibility, when that voice is working their way into their mind, often come to the way of wanting to be surrounded by people who mainly think like them. They actually want to hear more of the same kinds of ideas and thinking that others are sharing with them, rather than maybe hearing things different. And also, do you try to get people to do what you think is necessary to be happy? A lot of times people with lower ego flexibility try to convert people, particularly who they think are unhappy, into their version of happiness. They don't take a lot of time to listen to people as much as they do talking to people and trying to make them come around to the way they look at things, rather than trying to understand them better. So that was the first symptom that has to do with lower ego flexibility. We're going to look at another one now. You experience pseudo-happiness, or what I call fake happiness, this pleasure-based happiness. It can be a psychological sense of pleasure or a physical sense of pleasure. When people and life and the world appear to be aligning with your way of looking at things. So this is when you feel happy, when the world seems to be falling in alignment with where you're coming from. Life appears to be complying with your demands of it. Do you interpret agreement with your view of things as validation and affirmation of your way of life? Do you feel a sense of pride when proven right, or when people agree with you? There's a sense of, I know better, I know more than other people do. Or do you experience a sense of being better than, or more than, or greater than when you're right? Because being right is about being connected to truth. And if I'm right and you're wrong, then that's something that's good for me. So this is another symptom often experienced by people when that lower ego voice, lower ego flexibility voice is working its way into their life, into their ego mind, and ultimately into their other thoughts and feelings and behaviors. Another symptom, you display lots of angry thoughts and feelings and behaviors when people disagree with your ideas, beliefs, attitudes, and values. So oftentimes, people with lower ego flexibility, as I mentioned earlier, they're not very tolerant of differentness, and differentness that can come toward them from other people in the form of different ideas and thoughts, or different ways of feeling, different ways of acting and doing things. Often they can feel rejected, or that people are rejecting their version of truth by putting forth their own ideas and their approaches, which often touches the nerve. I'll call it the truth nerve, or their nerve of what they think is truth, when people seem to be resisting it or not being in alignment with it. Do you have a difficult time feeling happy when people are disagreeing with you? So in a conversation, when people are disagreeing, it's not easy for you to remain or stay or be happy, be in a relatively calm place, a peaceful place, but rather becoming more upset. Also, do you attack people when they are disagreeing with your ideas and beliefs, when people are getting toward the very lower end of that scale that I've talked about regarding lower ego flexibility, a 0 or a 1 on the volume scale? It is very difficult for them to hold their tongue, to not say anything, because they're so enamored with their version of life and truth that to make it very difficult to allow others to share them and to cultivate a sense of wanting to understand them or know them. And also, do you attack people for their ideas and beliefs which disagree with yours? It's as if you have to defend yourself. You feel that I must defend myself in the face of being told something that's different, something that maybe I don't want to know, particularly when it comes to things about happiness. So these are a few of the symptoms. I didn't get to all of them, but you can see them in the free download of my book, It's Your Ego Stupid. You don't have to have all of the symptoms I talk about or any of them all the time, but the more of them that you do have, and the more often they are happening, the stronger the indication that you are experiencing lower ego flexibility that needs to be healed. And by the way, you also need to consider the symptoms over time to get a clearer picture of what's going on, because our ego energy can hide quite well from us, even though it's often in plain sight for others to see. Hiding from us due to the ego energy prism we're looking through to know ourselves and to know our life. We're coming up on our first break. This is Dr. Nick. When we return, I'll be talking about ego stupidity, the reflections of it, as well as ego insights to help us understand what's going on beneath the scenes. You're listening to It's Your Ego Stupid on OMTimes Radio, and I'll see you after the break.
Conscious media for conscious minds. OMTimes. Being a radio host on IOM-FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single OMTimes endeavor. Host your show with OMTimes Radio Network.
My name is Victor Furman. Some call me The Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio, and we'll explore these topics and so much more on Destination Unlimited.
Hi, Dr. Nick Martin here. I want to invite you to visit my website, egoandspirit.info, where you can find lots of information on ego and download your free ebook copy of It's Your Ego Stupid. Fix it to fix your life. Also, please visit the shop page where you can find each of my other books, Ego Therapy, Ego Spiritualism, and The Two Voices Within.
A social distancing tip.
Putting distance between yourself and others is critical to slowing the spread of coronavirus. So here are ways to stay in contact without the physical contact part. Call, send a text, set up a video conference, post on social media, dedicate a song on the radio. If you have symptoms of fever, dry cough, and shortness of breath, call your healthcare provider before going to their office. For more info, visit coronavirus.gov.
Let's all do our part, because we're all #AloneTogether. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Welcome back. You're listening to It's Your Ego Stupid on OMTimes Radio, a show for intelligent, spiritual, and imperfect people, just like you and me. Now we're going to take a look at reflections of ego stupidity and when it's happening in a lower ego flexibility person's ability to experience happiness. Some of these may seem odd or strange or weird, maybe wrong, or funny or inappropriate. And that's because you're not living in that energy. But many people are. And for those with lower ego flexibility energy, it's leading them to engage in ego-rooted, non-reality-based thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, particularly those involving happiness. It can often lead them to conclude that the abnormal things that they're thinking, feeling, or doing are normal when they aren't. And like the symptoms, they can become part of their abnormal normal that they don't realize they're caught up in. But others often can, because they aren't looking at them through the same ego energy prism that the low ego flexibility person is looking through to see what's taking place. And this has nothing to do with intelligence or the absence of spirituality or being under the influence of a mental illness. Because we're all intelligent, spiritual, and stable people who have gotten caught up in the web of an abnormal world of our own making due to our unhealthy, imbalanced ego energy within the context of today's program is lower ego flexibility energy. And we can remain stuck there until we heal the energy within us that's leading us to create them. And we can do this with the use of ego medicine, which consists of beginning to know what ego is and what it isn't, getting a understanding of this energy at work in our life, this survival energy as I refer to it, which is intended to help us, but can become, in some respects, misguided in its efforts due to the imbalance that can happen that we talk about. Also, understanding some of the myths that are existent about ego and the energy that is. Understanding that it doesn't have an intellect, it doesn't have an ability to be aware of what it's doing in our lives, and it doesn't have an intentionality. It doesn't formalize a different strategy on how we should go about living our lives. We are the ones who do that. So that's the first contributor to ego medicine. Also, we must tune into our ego energy, which means getting an understanding of where our volume level, as I refer to it, is for how much ego power is at work in our ego energy, how much ego flexibility is at work, and also how much ego vulnerability. And all of my programs and my books provide lots of examples to give you a handle on just where that might be for your particular situation. And then finally, we need to work with replacing ego-rooted, non-reality-based, truth-disconnected thoughts and beliefs that we created. Remember, ego did not create them. It just supplied the energy, the fuel that we began to work with to create these ideas. And we replaced them with those ideas that are connected to truth and reality, both human and divine. And so the next part of our program today has to do with this third contributor to ego medicine, involving looking at reflections of ego stupidity and replacing ego-rooted, non-reality-based thoughts with those that are reality-based. So here's the first reflection. Thinking your truth should be everyone's truth if they want to be happy. Again, thinking that your truth, your ideas about truth and what is truthful, should be everyone's truth if they want to be happy. People with lower ego flexibility are often, again, as I mentioned earlier, they're really caught up in their notions and in their ideas and their truths about reality. And they are often very insistent on their way of looking at things and thinking about things, particularly about what it takes to be happy in your life. They act as if they know that there is the right way to be happy for the people to get to know. And instead of understanding that the real reality-based thinking is that there are many different ways for people to experience happiness, as long as they are living within those foundational things I talk about, like being at peace with yourself and others and coming from a place of love and all the other ones. When we're alignment, when we're experiencing those things in our life, there are so many, many different ways for people to experience happiness. And there isn't a limited number or specific way to go about doing that. So when we're caught up thinking that our truth about happiness is everybody's truth or should be that, when you're thinking that, it's your ego making you stupid. Another reflection of ego stupidity. I can only be happy with people who think like me and share my truth. People with low ego flexibility, when that voice is creeping into their mind, begin to think it consciously or unconsciously that I need to have people in my life in order to be happy who think like me, who walk around with the same beliefs and the same attitudes, the same values that I have. And they often find their way to those particular individuals with whom they often think the same things and are actually just repeating the same version of reality that they think they feel comfortable with. So this notion that happiness doesn't reside in developing relationships with different people who think differently than they do, when we're caught up in that kind of approach, that's our ego making us stupid. Another reflection. I must try to get others to be happy in the ways I used to be happy. So this is back to that conversion thing, that I feel an obligation, I feel a need to get other people to be more like me, to live in the life I live because I'm happy and I can tell them how they should be happy because I'm happy. Failing to realize that people often come from a different set of background, relationships, experiences that have helped to cultivate and create the individual that they are. And instead of asking them to be a duplicate of the low ego flexibility person, the more appropriate thing to be doing is to support people in their efforts to find happiness in ways that work better for them. And I should also mention, these are oftentimes, the lower ego flexibility person is often trying to help people who didn't ask for their help to begin with, who didn't ask for their help to become happier. So when we think that that's an obligation, that we must make other people happy in the ways that I feel happy, that's our ego making us stupid. Another reflection of ego stupidity. When people agree with me, the happiness I feel is genuine. People who are experiencing this energy often conclude that when they feel a sense of wellness inside, because people are agreeing with me, they're coming around the way I'm thinking about things and believing about things and valuing things, and they feel happiness when actually it's probably pseudo-happiness or fake happiness. There's a psychological pleasure that people maybe get off on when other people seem to be agreeing with them. But that's not the same thing as genuine happiness. We shouldn't need other people to think like us in order to be happy. If we're coming, again, from all those places I talked about at the beginning involving genuine happiness, this is not required. This isn't necessary. So when you're thinking that the happiness you're experiencing is genuine happiness because people agree with you, that's actually ego stupidity, because it's not that. It's something different. It's pseudo-happiness. Another reflection. I can't feel happy when people are disagreeing with me. I can't feel happy when people are disagreeing with me. People with lower ego flexibility, again, due to their rigid mind, their inflexible mind, often, and their sensitivity to the rejection of their truth, coming forth in the disagreement that people might be expressing toward them, often can't seem to feel that they could be happy, even in the context of these, what may be a healthy conflict, a healthy disagreement. A lot of times I watch television and I see discussions or debates or people who are getting caught up in their truths, and they begin to talk over each other, and they begin to get to the point where these conversations are useless, they're meaningless, because there's a whole lot of disrespect being displayed toward the views of others when they are engaged in these kind of ways of interacting. Another reflection of ego stupidity. So when people are caught up in, locked into this idea that happiness must be connected to agreement, and when people aren't agreeing with my version of things, looking at the same way, that I can't be happy with them or feel happy, that's your ego making you stupid. Another reflection. It's okay to insult someone's intelligence if it makes you happy. If it makes you happy, you can go ahead and insult people's intelligence. That's actually pseudo-happiness, a sort of a false reassurance that people might get for maybe putting other people down and looking at them in a different way, or lowering them in your own estimation as a way of elevating your sense of being happy. And if we're locked into doing something like that, that's not genuine happiness. That, again, is pseudo-happiness. It's a false form of happiness that people often get into when they're caught up in their own belief system and locked into it to the point that they're not open to other ideas. I want to mention one more quickly before we talk about ego insights. New, different, or better ideas can't help me be happy. People with lower ego flexibility are often stuck in their way of looking at things, thinking about things, and they have a difficult time with things that are different. And those things that are new or different or maybe even better are difficult for them to be happy with. They are much more comfortable with things that are more of the same. They just want to hear repetition of similar ideas, maybe said in different ways, but they're just basically the same idea, and have an intolerance, a lack of openness, a rigidity to looking at things in different ways that could also be a source of happiness. So when you're thinking that, it's your ego making you stupid. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about some insights, some specific insights connected to the symptoms and ego stupidity I've been talking about. These are insights that can help you to better see what's going on behind the scenes and beneath the surface when it comes to difficulty experiencing genuine happiness. These insights are intended to help you see more of your ego blindness and what ego is actually doing when it comes to difficulties experiencing genuine happiness that's actually lasting. The first insight, your lower ego flexibility voice is preventing you from knowing that people can be happy living in different truths. Being happy living in different truths, that other people have different truths that they can be living in, and they can be quite happy living within those truths. But that's something that the lower ego flexibility voice is blocking your awareness of, your understanding of, your awakening to. Another one. Your lower ego flexibility voice is preventing you from realizing that you can be happy with people who think differently from you. Being happy with those who are actually different is a really wonderful experience. Healthy people embrace differentness, and it can lend itself to things that they didn't know. That can be an enhancement to the lower ego flexibility person's life. And it's distancing you. This lower ego flexibility energy is distancing you from people who could enrich your life. Another insight, your lower ego flexibility voice is preventing you from knowing that converting others to your way of looking at things is not the means to happiness. It's not the means to their happiness. This makes me think about the arrogance of colonialization that has gone on over the many years. This idea that we need to bring a different way of looking at life and dealing with life to these other populations, many of the indigenous populations, some of them particularly were in India, some of them were obviously in this country or in the South Pacific, as if the arrogance of, we know a better belief system. We know a better way to live your life that can make you happy, oftentimes actually leading to a lot of misery for each of those populations. And so this is something that the lower ego flexibility voice is getting in the way of realizing, that you're not necessarily helping other people to be more happy than they already are. Another insight: your lower ego flexibility voice stops you from realizing the happiness you experience when people agree with you is not genuine. So when you get this agreement with your version of truth, and people fall in line or seemingly fall in line, and you feel this wellness, this happiness, that it's not really genuine happiness, it's fake happiness, it's false happiness. And the reason for that is because they needed to agree with you for you to feel it. With genuine happiness, you don't have to, anybody doesn't have to do anything for you to feel the things that you're feeling. So that's a reflection, or that's an indication of lower ego flexibility at work. It's stopping you from realizing what's really going on beneath the surface. And finally, on this focus on insights, your lower ego flexibility voice stops you from realizing that your disagreement with others doesn't have to be met with anger. Just because people disagree with you doesn't mean that anger has to be the result. It can be something that you can experience that's much more positive. There isn't a need to defend your truth when people disagree with you. And when people are getting into a defensive mode, there's usually an anger-related emotion going on that's energizing the need to do that. So this is another reflection of an insight needed in which the lower ego flexibility voice is at work, and it's preventing you from realizing and awakening and becoming more aware of some important things. I didn't, again, not get to all of the ego stupidity, the reflections of ego stupidity, or the insights involving ego's voice, but there are many more available in my book, It's Your Ego Stupid, available as a free download on the homepage of my website, egoandspirit.info. We're coming up on our second break. When we return, we'll be looking at the egoic impact on our spiritual wellness as it relates to becoming happy or experiencing happiness. This is Dr. Nick. You're listening to It's Your Ego Stupid on OMTimes Radio, and I'll see you after the break.
The Real Conscious Connection. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
OMTimes magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. Connect at omtimes.com. OMTimes, creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Hello, I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, host of OMTimes Magazine's flagship radio show, What is Going On? My passion is sifting through information, research, and innovations from new thought teachers, speakers, and researchers, pushing back the boundaries of what we know about life, energy, metaphysics, and the universe. I love shifting perceptions about who we are, why we're here, and how quickly impossible becomes normal when we open our minds, expand our awareness, and accept that the only limits that exist are those we place upon ourselves. So if you're the kind of forward-thinking, eager investigator of what lies beyond the current reality that most perceive, why not make a date to come play with me in the field of possibilities at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time every Thursday, and together we can discover what's really going on.
Hi, Dr. Nick here. I want to invite you to visit my website, egoandspirit.info, where you can find lots of information on ego and download your free ebook copy of It's Your Ego Stupid. Fix it to fix your life. Also, please visit the shop page where you can find focused ego meditations that can help you know whether you are truly speaking with your voice in your life or ego is speaking for you.
Melissa from Michigan. I work an extra part-time job serving lunch at my child's school, but I still can't afford to put food on our table.
Daniel from California. Choosing whether to pay the rent or pay to fix the car to get to work doesn't leave us with much at all. Now we can't even pay for meals.
Hunger is a story we can end. End it at feedingamerica.org. Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Welcome back. You're listening to It's Your Ego Stupid on OMTimes Radio, a show for intelligent, spiritual, and imperfect people, just like you and me. Now we're going to take a look at how lower ego flexibility can impact our spiritual wellness when it comes to experiencing happiness. We're going to look at ego's impact on the connection to the divinity within our humanity. The lessening of our spiritual wellness involves gaining distance from being the love, the life, and the energy God is within our thoughts, words, and deeds when ego energy is getting in the way of experiencing happiness. Ego is getting in the way of being the unconditional, connective, unburdened, and unlimited love that God is within our thoughts, our feelings, and behaviors as we go about experiencing happiness. Ego is getting in the way of being able to recognize the presence of God in all life forms, including ourselves, as well as honoring and respecting others at all times and all places as we go about experiencing happiness. And ego is getting in the way of being able to access the healing and transformative energy that God is within our being when we work with human and divine truth to experience happiness. Again, each of these can be undermining our spiritual wellness by distancing us from God, the God within us, our divinity. And here are some examples of ego's impact on spiritual wellness for those with lower ego flexibility. We're going to start with being the love God is. Our first example of ego's impact on spiritual wellness and happiness. People with lower ego flexibility have difficulty being spiritually well and happy when insisting that others accept their truth in order to be at peace with them. The need to have others accept our truth in order for them and for us to be at peace with them is what's going on here. In a way, you're placing a barrier, those with lower ego flexibility, a barrier involving human truth between you and others, that you want others to adhere to agree with, to come to know and to accept and become who they are, a part of who they are. Your divinity and being the love God is doesn't involve placing any conditions or requirements or demands upon others to be at peace with them and yourself, so that you can be the unconditional love that God is and that you are. But when this isn't happening, you're disconnecting from your spirituality and you're less spiritually well. Another impact on spiritual wellness and happiness. People with lower ego flexibility have difficulty being spiritually well and happy when they are drawing upon fear and anger to get others to know their truth. As I've said earlier, a lot of times the world isn't complying with the version of reality that the person with lower ego flexibility is experiencing. The world is a very complex and a very diverse place. It's not a black and white world. It's not a simplistic world that oftentimes the lower ego flexibility person wants it to be. And so in their response to this, they often can become frustrated and start to use what I call tools like anger and fear in an effort to force others to agree with them, to, in effect, embrace their truth. And the reality is, and I call it the divine reality, we can only share our truth with unconditional love and we can welcome others to make their choice, which may or may not align with ours. Because your divine connection doesn't involve compelling others with fear and anger-based messages in order to bring them to your truth. And when this is happening, when you're actually doing that, you're disconnecting from your spirituality, and you're less spiritually well. Now we're going to talk a little bit about ego's impact on being the life God is. People with lower ego flexibility have difficulty being spiritually well when they're dishonoring and they're disrespecting another's truth as a means to their happiness. So when we're disrespecting other people and it makes us feel good to insult or attacking using put-downs or disrespectful questioning of another's truth, when those kinds of things are going on, this is not keeping with being the life God is. This is dishonoring and disrespecting may only bring people to what maybe I've said called fake happiness, a pleasure-based happiness rooted in some form of psychological pleasure that the person might be experiencing. Your divinity and being the life God, it doesn't involve this way of treating others as a means to your happiness. So when that's happening, when you actually are dishonoring and disrespecting others in the name of seeking to be happy, this is when you are disconnecting from your spirituality and you're less spiritually well. Another impact involving being the life God is. People with lower ego flexibility have difficulty being spiritually well when they are failing to honor and respect the truth others know, which is serving their happiness. This ability to honor and to respect the truth that others know, even if it's not our truth, even if it's not our human truth, but if it's serving their happiness, we are not being the life God is. In a way, we can be maintaining a blindness and a lack of openness to what others have learned along their life's journey. Your divine connection doesn't involve dishonoring and disrespecting the truth others are using to bring them to genuine happiness. God allows us to know happiness in many different ways. So when this is happening, you're disconnecting from your spirituality and are less spiritually well. And last today, we're going to talk about being the energy God is and ego's impact on it when it comes to being happy. Being able to recognize the availability of healing and transformative energy within our being when we're connected to human and divine truth. This is a capacity, as I've said before, 3 million years within the making. I spoke last week about a divine age that we all are, which is 3 million years. We may only be in our 20s, 30s, 40s, or beyond, but our divine age is about that many years old because it involves the culmination of the love, the life, and the energy God is, which has led to your incredible design and my incredible design, the incredible design which has given us a brain and a heart and eyes and ears and an ego that is designed to help serve us in our survival efforts, sort of as a backup system, if I might call it, unfortunately, that may come into the foreground when things are taking place in the world that challenge this. So here are an example or a couple examples of this taking place, an example of ego's impact on our spiritual wellness and happiness. People with lower ego flexibility have difficulty being spiritually well when healing and transformation is being undermined by mistruths about what is required to know genuine happiness. When we're resting on a rather weak, rather than strong foundation involving the 5 ingredients I mentioned at the beginning of today's show, your divine connection doesn't allow for healing and transformation when you're embracing false notions about the means to happiness, particularly those that emphasize people coming around to knowing and living your version of truth. not needing to be at peace, not needing to be motivated by love, not accepting yourself and others as they are. So when this is happening, you're disconnecting from your spirituality and you're less spiritually well. And I'm going to mention one more impact on spiritual wellness and happiness. People with lower ego flexibility have difficulty being spiritually well when that healing and transformation is being undermined by failing to recognize the boundless ways that genuine happiness can be found by they and others when it's rooted in peace, love, and each of those other important ingredients, accepting ourselves, living with appropriate expectations of ourselves as opposed to faulty ones, and so on. That we can do this within the unlimited myriad of human experiences that involve the body, mind, and spirit. That your ego energy, your being the ego energy, involves healing and transformation, in which you're receptive to all of the options and the opportunities that have been made available to you in knowing genuine happiness. Again, when you're coming from a place of peace and love, and you have a purpose rooted in service, and are living healthy expectations, as well as an acceptance of yourself. But when that's not happening, you're disconnecting from your spirituality, and you're less spiritually well. As we leave our focus on ego's impact on our spiritual wellness, I want to say that we often make God and our connection to God so much harder than it has to be. And that's what's happening when ego is getting in between us. God and life and we become so much better and easier when we are able to remove that obstacle. Now I want to offer you a frame of reference for knowing when you are healing from lower ego flexibility and are able to experience genuine happiness. All of the symptoms and the ego stupidity and ego's impact on our spiritual wellness I've referred to earlier was when ego was speaking for you and through you. When you're healing your lower ego flexibility, this energy, this is what your voice will be speaking. This is an excerpt from the Two Voices Within. For so long, I had struck out at those who did not comply with my image of reality. I had either struck at them with my thoughts, words, or deeds fueled by my seething anger or fear, or I had silently struck at them by quietly expressing my emotions in more subtle thoughts, words, or deeds. In either case, I did not realize what the emotion was truly telling me. I had so often interpreted it, when I could see it, as an affirmation of my truth, as fuel to be used in bringing others to know the truth I know. I now see that it was telling me how far I was from the truth. The greater my anger, fear, or sadness, the greater my distance from the truth, both human and divine. My thoughts had gotten lost in the land of faulty beliefs, beliefs built upon all of the illusions I had embraced in the name of my safety and survival. Again, the words of your voice when healing from lower ego flexibility. As we leave our focus on lower ego flexibility and experiencing genuine happiness, please give some thought to the symptoms, the ego stupidity, the insights, and the spiritual impact that I've shared with you. And if any of it resonates with you, please help me to share it with others. We've reached the end of today's program. I hope what I've shared with you can serve as a dose of ego medicine, assisting you in your efforts to know true happiness. Our program next week will focus on higher ego flexibility energy and difficulty that people may have experiencing genuine happiness when caught up in this energy. These are people who believe that others often own and know the truth about happiness and what it is, and how one should go about experiencing it in one's life. Unfortunately, often leading them into the wrong people and wrong places at the wrong times. Their emotional experiences are often filled with fake happiness when they have found the right people they think are the right people to lead them in their efforts to find happiness by embracing their truth. But they also often live in roles such as the adult child, the cultist, and the puppet due to their over-reliance on others telling them the right way to live. I want to mention before leaving that you can purchase each of my books, Ego Therapy, Ego Spiritualism, and The Two Voices Within, and It's Your Ego Stupid at the online bookstores for Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Balboa Press. I end today's show with this message. The great news is that working to heal your ego energy using ego medicine by growing your awareness of its symptoms, ego stupidity, insights, and spiritual impact will allow the divine truth in your being to flow and to shine through you and allow you to fully embrace each of the divine gifts. The spiritual part of healing is a given. It's part of your endowment. Divine truth and the divine gifts are part of your heritage that already exists within you. You need do nothing more to be spiritual. You already are. You are a spiritual being having a human experience. You only need to enhance your humanity with ego medicine so that all which is available to you is given. Fix your ego to fix your life, humanly and spiritually. I want to thank you for listening and allowing me to be your servant. I want you to have a great week, and please come back to my next program. In peace and love, this is Dr. Nick saying goodbye for now.